In the middle of the engagement party, I stood, took the mic, and said 3 words: play the call. The ballroom at Flint Hills Country Club went as quiet as a Kansas winter. Chandeliers glinted over crystal. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and filet mignon, and the AV tech I'd bribed with a pan of my peach cobbler hit the big screen behind me. The audio clipped on. My voice first, polite, then the man's voice, excited, professional, unmistakable. Ms. Foster? I'm a producer with a national appraisal program. I'm calling because a watch with your father's engraving just came through our hands. Our donors have authorized an offer. $18 million, if you can confirm provenance and legal ownership. Gasps. Forks paused in midair. My daughter's fiancé swallowed hard and reached for a water glass that wasn't there. His mother's pearls clicked as her jaw tightened. That was the promise of payoff. The turn was simple. A worthless old thing nobody wanted me to bring near their white tablecloths suddenly mattered more than their names stitched on napkins. Before I rewind this reel, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I read every single one when the house is quiet and the dog is snoring at my feet. Now, let me take you back to how we got here. 9 months before that night. I'm Eileen Foster, 66, Wichita, Kansas, widow of 38 years. I drove a school bus for 21 of those, and I worked nights at a small aerospace plant when the budget got lean. If you flew on anything that rolled out of this state between 92 and 2010, there's a decent chance I riveted something you put your faith in. I am not delicate. I'm not loud, either. I'm the kind of woman who gets the kids home in a blizzard, trims a coupon, knows every cashier by name, and has a spare roll of duct tape in the trunk. I like my coffee black, my porch swept, and my truth with both feet on the ground. The watch, my dad's watch, wasn't pretty. Brass worn smooth in places, a crack in the crystal like a hairline crescent moon. Black dial with a faint luminous star at 12. He called it ugly, and he loved it. My father was a machinist who did contract work back when Wichita was dust and steel and noise, and one spring he came home with a watch he'd been allowed to keep from a shop that closed. Prototype, he said. Never made it to shelves. It was built for a handful of crazy pilots. It keeps time like a threat. He scratched inside the case with a tool. 2E Foster. Keep time. Dad, 1974. He had big hands and he did everything gently. Remember that detail. My daughter, Cora, inherited my stubbornness and her father's eyes. 31, quick with Photoshop and slogans, all bright angles and ambition. She runs digital campaigns for a boutique firm in Kansas City that pays her in kombucha and compliments. Cora is the kind of girl who can make a spreadsheet look like a mood board, who never met a problem she couldn't solve with a playlist and a pitch deck. When she brought home her boyfriend Cal, I liked him for about 6 minutes and 30 seconds. He was easy on the eyes, yes. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Tall, expensive hair, the kind of white sneakers that look like surgery, a perfect laugh that practiced itself in mirrors. He said, "Ma'am," too quickly, and I insist, too often. The first time he shook my hand, he sanded his thumb over the calluses in his palm like he needed you to see them. "I'm building a startup," he told me within 5 minutes, which is a bad sign in my book. Startups and tornadoes show up without stable walls. "Minimalism," he added, sweeping a gaze around my living room. "There's freedom in letting go." "I grew up with nothing," I said mildly. "I prefer holding on." He smiled like he got it, but he didn't. He came with a mother whose pearls were bigger than her smile. Meredith Rivers. River of what? I wondered. Champagne? Entitlement? The kind of woman who writes notes to managers and says, "I don't mean to be that person," after she's already been that person. She sits on boards and chairs committees and uses people like place cards. If you know, you know. The first uneasy sign was small enough to seem like dust. We were in my kitchen on a Saturday morning. The radio hummed. The dog's paws clicked on the vinyl. I was frying bacon because I am a simple woman with priorities. Cal lifted the watch from its hook, weighed it in his palm, and chuckled. "This old thing?" he said. "You're not seriously going to wear that to the engagement party, are you?" "It'll be under my sleeve," I said. "Besides, my father took it to work every day for 20 years. It's lucky." "Lucky like a rabbit's foot," he said, wrinkling his nose. "Dead harm and superstition. It's broken. It's worthless. You should declutter. There's freedom in letting go." I slid my spatula under a slice of bacon and set the watch back on its hook with the other hand. "Not everything that looks old is junk," I said. "Sometimes it's a story that outlived its teller." "Stories get heavy," he said cheerfully. "I should know. I monetize them." I put a plate in front of him and said, "Eat before it gets cold." The engagement came in a flurry of champagne and hashtags. His proposal was filmed with 3 cameras and a drone. I watched their slick, edited video on my couch with the dog and a grilled cheese, and I hated that I cried. Love is love, but spectacle is a different species. They announced it at Meredith's club, and she swept me into air-conditioned rooms I didn't understand. There were private elevators, a dining room that smelled like money, and a members-only closet for winter white. She liked me because I was a prop for their narrative. Widow from the wrong side of Kellogg. Now look at our generosity. If you know the type, you can see it without your glasses. "Eileen, darling," she said, pressing cool lips to my cheek. "We're going to take such good care of Cora, but if you don't mind me saying, leave the planning to us. It's a lot of pressure, and you must be so tired after all those years. Driving. We'll seat you somewhere you can see everything." She smiled. My hands were clean, but I still wanted to wipe them. A week later, Cal and Cora came to help me declutter. That word again. They brought branded bins and a little label printer and an energy I couldn't keep up with. If you've ever watched a tornado pick up a toy you didn't know you loved until you saw it spin away, you know the feeling. "I've got a charity drive on Monday," Cora called from my hallway, already knee-deep in my linen closet. "We could donate these old towels, and the coats, and what's in here?" "The guest room," I said. "Careful with the cedar chest." "Mum," she said in her tone for, "Be reasonable. You don't need half of this. Minimalism." I forced a smile. "If you throw away my wedding album, I'll haunt you." She laughed, and I wasn't kidding. By afternoon, my driveway looked like a yard sale for ghosts. Cora and Cal stood triumphant over bags and boxes. The watch hung in the kitchen, and I saw Cal glance at it once, twice, like it was a fly he intended to swat. "Mum," he said, "I've got a guy who takes electronics and small appliances and sorts them for parts. I'll drop this stuff with him now, save you a trip." "Leave it," I said. "I'll handle it Monday." My voice was lighter than my chest. "Babe," he told Cora, "we're doing your mum a favor. We'll be right back, Eileen. 2 trips, and your life is blank slate." He scooped up 3 heavy bags I hadn't labeled, and I felt everything inside me reach toward those knots, like a mother reaching for a child in a crowd. "What's in there?" I asked. "Old magazines and kitchen junk," he said breezily. "You've got like 3 garlic presses. No offense." He left before I could untie anything, And maybe that's on me. Maybe it's not. I should have insisted. I should have grabbed a knife and cut those bags open on the driveway. Instead, I watched my porch light blink when the door closed, and the dog put his chin on my knee, like he understood less than he wanted. When they came back, Cora was flushed with victory. "We did it," she said, kissing my cheek. "You'll feel so light, Mom." "I feel like a pocket turned inside out," I said. "Where's the watch?" Her smile faltered. "What? On the hook?" We all looked. The hook was empty. "Cal?" she said, slow. He laughed. "I bumped it. It fell behind the stove. We can pull it out." We pulled the stove. Dust, a dropped pasta shell, a single dime, no watch. "Maybe it's in one of the bags," he said, shrugging. "It's like broken, right?" He was already tapping his phone. "It's not a big deal." Cora looked at me, that quick flicker of worry like a bird. "It's sentimental," she said, half to me, half to herself. "We'll find it." I went cold. I searched the house like a woman with no pride left, top of the cabinets, under sofa cushions, in the laundry basket, in the pockets of coats we'd just hauled outside. I climbed into the back of their SUV like a raccoon and ripped open a bag, then another, then another. "Stop, Mum," Cora said, laughing, then not laughing. "Mum? Which one did you take to your guy?" I asked without turning around. "Eileen?" Cal said, for the first time without that glaze of charm. "Watch your tone." That was the first time Cora stepped between us. "Cal, go inside," she said. "Mom, I'll call the donation center." "What donation center?" I asked. "Good Circle," she said. "The warehouse on Tyler. They partner with the club for drives." All that Monday, I was on the phone with a woman named Paula who shouldn't have to shoulder other people's bad decisions. She was kind, and she was overwhelmed. "Mom," she kept saying, "we get hundreds of bags. If someone on intake found a watch, it could be anywhere by now." By Tuesday, I had a police report filed for stolen property. Yes, stolen. I am not a lawyer, but I know right from wrong. There's a word for someone who takes what isn't theirs and puts it where you can't get it back. It's not declutterer. That night, I went to bed with my father's words in my mouth. Keep time. I woke with grit in my teeth. I am 66, but I am not fragile. You don't drive a bus full of 8th graders in an ice storm and come out a coward. I called a friend who runs facilities for a high-rise downtown. Aaliyah's the kind of woman who can get you blueprints for a building and the maintenance guy's favorite snack. "You always send me honey at Christmas," I told her. "I need a favor." 3 hours later, I was in her office watching security footage on a screen large as a wall. It was my alley camera, Sunday afternoon. There I was, a blur of a woman with a bun and a sweatshirt, fiddling with a garage door. There was Cal, hoisting bags out like he was the king of trash. He took 3 trips, then walked the last one past my driveway to the service alley. He looked over his shoulder. He set the bag behind a dumpster, checked his phone, waited. A pickup truck nosed in. A man in a ball cap hopped out. He lifted the lid, took the bag, and drove away. Cal rubbed his hands like a magician after a trick. I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Can I get a copy?" I asked. Aaliyah slid a thumb drive across her desk. "You didn't get this from me," she said. "I'll deny everything. Also, he's disgusting." "Agreed," I said, voice steady. "Thank you." I sent the clip to the detective who took my report. I sent it to myself, 3 different email accounts, like a woman hiding a spare key in the yard. Cora came over that night with 2 pints of ice cream. "Mum," she said, sitting on my couch like the cushion could break beneath her. "Cal said you accused him of stealing. He did, I said. And I did. You're being dramatic. I pulled up the footage on my TV. The room went quiet except for the dog's snore. When Cal appeared on screen, Cora put a hand on her mouth, then dropped it. She watched the cat man take the bag with the patience of someone watching her own heartbeat skip. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I don't love that. But Mum, he didn't know the watch was in there. He thought he was helping. He's been helping me declutter. I ask him to. You know my schedule. Help is not what you call it when it costs someone else their treasure, I said, and the word treasure made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. He did it behind my back. He lied when I asked where he took it. That's not help. That's theft with extra steps. You hate him, she said, eyes wet, as if I'd said weather isn't real. You've hated him from the first second. I disliked how he spoke in a room he doesn't own, I said. That's different. She stood. I love him. He loves me. He's good to me. Good men don't make their women smaller to fit in their pockets, I said quietly. Remember that detail for later. She grabbed her jacket. If this is the hill you want to die on, Mom. It's the hill your grandfather kept time on, I said, a little sharp. And I'm not dying on anything. I'm walking into the light with my head up. For a while after, it felt like I was living in a house whose walls were made of misunderstandings. Cora retreated to the city. Cal wasn't welcome on my porch. Meredith began to treat me like a piece of furniture she would have reupholstered but couldn't legally move without the permission of a board. The humiliations came packaged like cookies, lovely on the outside, crumbs on the inside. They seated me at the very back of the club dining room at the tasting. We needed a table for the vendors, the hostess said, pressing a truffle into my hand as if I were a child to be bribed. They assigned me tasks that felt more like errands for the image they were building. Be in charge of the favor boxes, Meredith said, handing me a list with 53 line items. Nothing too on the nose. We want rustic luxe. Which is? I asked. Chalkboard signage that doesn't look like a chalkboard, she said, airily. You'll figure it out. At the bridal shower, held in a conservatory that would have been an oven if not for money, they played a game where guests had to guess which of the bride's childhood photos was Cora. They got the baby pictures wrong. They got the middle school haircut wrong. They didn't get the look on her face when she opened my gift wrong. A handkerchief from my mother, blue thread stitched along the edge like a sky. Meredith laughed. We're going minimalist, she said, as if I'd brought a dead plant. No crumbs of sentimentality at the table. When I stood to refill my iced tea, I heard Cal behind me, murmuring to a groomsman. She's sweet, he said, but she's got this hoarder thing. We're trying to help. I walked to the bathroom and counted to 50. On the way back, I paid the server in cash for the tab that wasn't mine. If you've ever done that, you know it doesn't make you feel better. It just makes you sleep with no one owing you, which is a different kind of quiet. Final straw? I came home to a bill. Not a request, a bill. Associated Groom's Gift Package, it read. Monogrammed cufflinks, heritage, straight razors, and a set of modern vintage watches from a brand that thinks every problem is a vibe. I was to pay for it, as mother of the bride. The total was more than my mortgage in 1998. I left it on the counter, drank a glass of water, and watched the dog watch me. Then I folded the paper and put it in a drawer I use for things that make me ugly. I pivoted, quietly. I am not built for begging. I am built for calling people who owe me favors because I fed their kids cocoa when the power was out. Slim chance, fat chance, doesn't matter. You stack chances until you've got a step stool. Good circle called Midday Wednesday. Paula again. Mom? She said, voice high and careful like we were talking over eggshells. A watch came through intake. Our appraiser flagged it. It's rare. Like, everybody stopped moving in the room. It's got your father's scratching on the inside. The engraving. I sat down on the stairs. My knees have learned to tell me the truth before my brain does. Where is it? I asked. It's in a safe we have for high-value stuff, she said. We also called a contact at a museum because the appraiser squealed when she saw it. And then, you're not going to believe this, but a producer from a big national appraisal program called because our appraiser has their number for things like this. They're like a mere... Well, you know the one. He asked for you. I swallowed. How would he know me? The engraving, she said again. And your name's on our form. He called back 20 minutes later and said they had donors lined up. It's a lot. An hour later, my phone rang from a number with too many digits. I let it go to voicemail. My heart banged like a screen door. Then I called back, pressed my phone to my ear, and braced for customer service on hold. Ms. Foster? The voice was kind, present. I'm with the Heritage Appraisal Tour. We saw the watch that came in through Good Circle. It appears to be a prototype from a defunct Wichita maker, Lockridge and Hale, development series for a supersonic program, late 50s. We've never seen one intact. Ours, our viewers, our donors. This is a big day for people who care about that era. If you can confirm provenance, your father's work, the engraving, our donor consortium would like to make an offer. It's an unusual sum. 18 million, if we can curate it for a museum, if we can do this right. It's strange what your brain does in moments like that. It doesn't run to the bank. It runs to your father's lunchbox, to the smell of oil and sweat, to a backyard where service berries stained your tongue, to a man's hand on your head when you had a fever. It runs to your daughter laughing on a swing. Money is a weightless number until it hits in a room that's seen hunger. Are you certain? I said, voice steady. We are, he said. But we need to make sure it wasn't stolen. It appears someone presented it anonymously at a pop-up we held in Kansas City last week, a man with a cap and a fake name. Our appraiser spotted the engraving when she opened the back to look at the movement. We traced the name through Good Circle's intake to you. I have to ask, with respect, are you missing your watch? Yes, I said. Yes, I am. I saw Cal in my alley on the pausing screen of my mind and had to sit again. I filed a police report. We can coordinate with law enforcement, he said, crisp at the edges now. If you'd like. Also, forgive me. But we have a journalist sniffing around because this is a story. We'd prefer to do this without causing a circus. I'm not afraid of circuses, I said. I raised a daughter. But no, I don't want a tent over my house. I asked if I could record the call for my memory. He said, of course. Kansas is one-party consent. Remember that detail. I hung up, then called the detective, then called the Attorney General's office because Cora's friend's boyfriend's cousin works there and had once told me at a barbecue that they have a small bureau for consumer crimes, scams that smell like hospitality but rot people out from the inside. Myra Colt is 5'2" and has the haircut of a woman who can run in heels. She called me back within an hour. You're the lady with the watch, she said, and a video. I am, I said. I also have a daughter who's about to marry a man who put my watch in a bag behind a dumpster. I'm tired, but I'm awake. She made a sound like a woman smiling without showing teeth. I'm going to need the footage, the call, the Good Circle paperwork, and your blessing to coordinate with the show. We've had this guy, ball cap, come up in other cases. Elder Centre, donations. He's not smart, but he's made a nickel off every crooked corner he's found. You think he's tied to Cal? I asked, even though the shape of that answer was sitting in my living room. Men like your future son-in-law don't get their hands dirty, she said. They know people who like dirt. I almost hesitated. Almost. You start a war when you bring law into love. But if someone breaks your window and then tells you to think about how cold it's going to be to replace it, you don't warm yourself with their concern. You seal the draft and send a bill. Do it, I said. But if possible, I want the first domino to fall at the engagement party. With a microphone. He loves an audience. So do I. She laughed. You remind me of my grandmother. She once ended a family feud at a baptism with 3 sentences and a slice of cake. Myra coordinated with the show. Good Circle kept the watch in a safe with 3 locks and a volunteer who slept with the list of combinations under her pillow. The producer, his name was Leon, and he said it like he'd been answering phones since radio, took my call at 8:33 nights in a row as we threaded the needle. He helped us create a chain of custody for the watch that could survive court scrutiny. He also did a little curation dance I could hear through the phone. He was in love with this thing. It wasn't just the valuation, it was the story. Lockridge and Hale made a handful of prototypes designed for pilots to navigate without fail when everything else failed. The movement used a weird regulator, what Leon called a fishtail, and had a luminous star at 12 that had never made it to production because the luminous paint they'd used required a handling protocol nobody honoured until laws caught up. Half the prototypes were destroyed. The rest were lost in drawers. This one had been on my father's wrist. This one kept time in a house with a cheap clock that chimed 2 minutes late, always. This one watched me blow out candles. I told Leon about my father's handwriting, stump-thick pencil grip, the way he hummed when nervous. He told me about a donor who cried when he saw a photo of the watch, because a thing like that had hung over his father's workbench too. He also told me, and this mattered later, that he'd interviewed 2 men in Kansas City who claimed they'd found the watch in a box on the curb. None of that matched the footage. One of those men? Ball cap. Meanwhile, Meredith planned. The engagement party, she told me on the phone, will be a gala, really. Black tie, no cowboy boots. We're doing an ice sculpture. I'm having Cal's friend cut together a tribute video for his work. You'll love it. If you must bring that old watch, which, why would you? Please keep it out of sight. I don't have it, I said. Truth is a blade. It cuts clean. But I will be bringing a story. How quaint, she said, and hung up, like a woman laying a pearl necklace into a drawer. On the afternoon of the party, Wichita did that thing it does in September, where the heat acts like it forgot how to leave. The club smelled like money and rosemary. The staff wore black. The valet smiled like he meant it because he works for tips. They put me at a table near the kitchen doors again, someone with a headset whispering behind a ficus. The band was good. The lighting was flattering. The wine was not my taste, but it was cold. I wore my mother's dress, navy, a little tight in the arms, and a cardigan my neighbour had knitted because I'm not a woman who pretends I'm not cold. I pinned my hair with the same tortoise-shell comb I wore on my wedding day. I carried a tote with a black binder, a thumb drive, a Ziploc bag with a tiny screwdriver, force of habit, and a tin of mints. If you saw me, you would have thought I was a librarian. In a way, I was. They rolled the tribute video early because Mercy is efficient. It was cut like a campaign ad. Cal striding through a co-working space with plants, Cal opening a door to a room with a sign that read, Founders. Cal shaking hands with men who nodded like they were hired to nod. My daughter appeared in soft light, her laugh a bell. At the end, they did a montage of childhood photos. Cora with a gap-toothed grin, Cora in pigtails, Cora in high school with a jersey. They included one of mine too, me on a park bench with her on my lap and the watch just visible on my wrist. Old habits, the caption teased. The room chuckled. That's when my spine stiffened and my mouth softened. I stood before I could think about whether I should. I walked to the mic stand near the band, like I was walking down a church aisle for communion. I smile easily. That night, I didn't. Hi, I said. I'm the mother of the bride. There was polite applause. Meredith beamed with her teeth. Cal slipped his arm around Cora and kissed her head. Cora smiled like you do when you hope the ground stays still. The thing about time, I said, is it moves whether you count it or not, but counting it together is special. Cal lifted a glass, ready to toast. Meredith turned toward me, expectant. I reached into my tote and lifted the thumb drive. Play the call, I said. 3 words, flat as a command and sharp as a hinge. Trevor, the AV kid with freckles and biceps like he once baled hay, looked at the stage manager. The manager stared at Meredith. Meredith lifted her palm, then lowered it, unsure. We'd rehearsed this with Trevor in secret. Me at his mama's table with the cobbler, him checking SOPs. He did what he promised. The screen lit. The audio clicked. The ballroom's clink and murmur folded like a pocket. Ms. Foster, I'm with the Heritage Appraisal Tour. You know the rest. $18 million hummed in the ceiling like a fluorescent light. Your ears don't know what to do with numbers like that. A bus driver can measure 6 million miles, maybe, but not $18 million. The word million hung in the crystal like a moth. People react in funny ways when money shows up in a sentence. Some sit up straighter. Some shrink. Some look for an exit. Some reach for a glass with no water. You can judge a person by which one they are. Cal smiled. He's practiced being shocked. Wow, he said into the silence. What an honor for the Fosters. That's wow. I took a remote from my pocket. Trevor had shoved it there and pressed a button. The screen flickered. The alley appeared. Cal appeared. Bags. Black. Not. Capman. Truck. The noise in the room shifted, like a weather front arriving. Myra stood from her table against the wall and took out a small badge. She doesn't do drama. She does posture. Cal, I said, and my voice did not quiver. You like minimalism, so let's use small words. You took my bags. You lied. You put my father's watch into a bag behind a dumpster and texted someone to take it. That's theft. Eileen, he said, making my name sound like an injury. We cleared it with Cora. We were helping. Did you tell me where you were taking them? I asked. It was a donation, he said. No harm. Then why did your friend present the watch at a pop-up under a false name? I asked. Why did he tell a producer a story that wasn't true? Why did you text your friend to meet you in an alley instead of taking the bag into my house and asking me to sort it? I could have kept going for an hour. Instead, I stopped. Because you wanted anything valuable to fall into a hand you controlled. Mum, Cora whispered, eyes on the floor. Please. Cora, I said softly without looking away from Cal. I love you. I love your daughter? Cal said into the room, a politician now, palms open, voice rich. I'm sorry her mother is confused. That's enough, Myra said. She walked to the mic like a woman who doesn't get stopped when she says excuse me. I'm with the Attorney General's office. We've been tracking a ring of thieves who call themselves declutterers. They've been flipping donated goods and items accidentally thrown out by persuading vulnerable people they didn't need them, then fencing valuables through a network that includes at least one appraiser who doesn't ask too many questions. We have video, call logs, a recorded decoy sale, and, thanks to Ms. Foster here, a direct link to your payment for hauling to a man in a cap who brought a watch to a national appraisal day last week. It's going to be a long night for some of you. Meredith stood, voice like a broken bell. How dare you? This is a private event. It's an engagement party, Myra said. You invited the public the minute you hired a photographer and tagged the club. Also, Ma'am, if you move toward me again, I'll ask security to escort you to a chair. Your son's guest list includes 2 men who've sold items stolen from senior center donation boxes. If they're here, they can sit. There is a particular kind of silence that falls when the social rules lose to the legal ones. It's the sound of a room that expected to bend reality with influence and suddenly finds reality has a stiff back. Cal smoothed his hair. This is a misunderstanding, he said. We'll sort it out privately. I'm sure we can come to... Stop talking. The man at his elbow, his lawyer, apparently, a man with a red face that didn't match his suit, hissed into his ear. Right now. Cora started to cry. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the kind that fills a face without sound. I wanted to go to her. I stood where I was. I am a mother and a witness. You can be both without running. Mum, she said, voice small. You said you didn't have the watch. I didn't, I said. Good Circle did. And a producer called me because they do due diligence. They wanted to offer $18 million to buy it for a museum. But they don't want to buy a scandal. They want to buy a story with clean hands. What museum? Someone asked faintly in a back row, as if the details could ease them. The Central Plains Museum of Flight. Leon's voice spoke through the speakers a second later. He was on a call we'd patched to the AV board. Trevor had loved that part. We have donors whose fathers and grandfathers put rivets into wings in this city. We want this watch to live where kids can press their palms to glass and hear it in their bones. We offered an unusual sum because sometimes money has to do more than make a bank happy. It's meant to make history breathe. Meredith's face did something I've only seen porcelain do when it's too hot. 18? She started, then closed her mouth like a door. Cal looked at the screen, at himself in my alley. He looked like a man seeing his reflection in a spoon for the first time, as if he'd never imagined a world where a lens gave him back something he didn't control. You threw away my father's watch, I said to him, not loud, not whispering. You tried to make me small in rooms where I paid for the lights to be on. You made my daughter choose between your curated life and my mess. Here's my compromise. I will not say another word to you after tonight, but you are going to hear plenty. The doors opened. It's always a small sound, the soft press of hinges. 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes agent stepped in like stage cues. Bullcap Man wasn't wearing the cap. He sat near the bar, eyes bugging like a comic. He tried to stand. Myra shook her head once. He sat back down. The officers moved to him. He didn't run. He looked at Cal with a pleading I'd seen in dogs. Cal didn't look back. Sir, one officer said quietly, we need to talk. They read him something that turned the room into a courtroom without a bench. People shifted. Someone clinked a glass accidentally and flinched. Eileen, Leon's voice said in my ear. I had an earbud, and isn't that ridiculous? We should let your daughter breathe. Do you want me to cut the feed? No, I said. Let them hear the end. Evan Ruiz, the journalist I'd looped in, local, curious, good heart, stood near the press table they'd set up for their own handful of society writers. He clocked everything with a notebook instead of a phone. Old school. He'd been the one to tell me, over coffee at a diner with cracked red vinyl, that the story was bigger than a watch. Every time someone like Cal helps, someone like you loses the one thing they kept because their father taught them to keep it, he'd said, stirring sugar into a cup he never drank. The thing about those guys is they think the story pulls from their bank account. It doesn't. It pulls from yours. The fallout wasn't cinematic. Real life rarely is. Cal didn't flip a table. He didn't run. He didn't confess. He put his glass down too carefully and asked for a lawyer. Myra asked him to come downtown in the morning, and he said he'd be there. His friend, the cap man, left in custody. Meredith sat, then stood, then sat again. When she finally found words, they were small. "Cora," she said, hand out in half a prayer, "we'll fix this." Cora looked at her mother-in-law-to-be's palm like it was a brochure. She looked at me. She looked between us like a woman crossing a creek on stones that aren't steady. "Did you know?" she asked Meredith. "About the donation guy?" Meredith's face did a fast math. She shook her head too hard. "I knew he hauled," she said. "He's polite. He came recommended." "By who?" Cora asked. Silence answered. "Mom?" Cora said at me like a question and an apology in one breath. She came toward me. We did not do the thing where we fall into the water and thrash. We pressed foreheads together for a second. Then she stepped back. "I'm so sorry," she said in a whisper that sounded like the first warm day in March. "I know," I said. "Let's breathe." The band didn't know what to do. They're trained to play when there's tension. But they decided, a credit to them, that silence had a place. People stood, shook their dresses down, loosened ties. Some left with the studied indifference of people terrified of a story misprinting their names. Others came to me with hands and eyes and words. "My brother," one woman said, "lost our grandfather's harmonica to a rummage man. We never found it." A club manager stood with me while I breathed. "We're not supposed to take sides," she whispered. "But the thing about this place is sometimes we forget who we throw out to. Keep the lights on." She slipped a napkin in my tote with her phone number on it. I still have it. The rest of that week, life turned into paperwork and long hallways. I gave a statement. I sat through a recorded interview where they asked me a question I thought I'd answered, and then asked it again from a different angle, because that's how you build the shape of the truth. Good Circle had catalogued the watch with a number, and we did a little dance with chain of custody. The show sent an appraiser, Dr. Livia Park, to Wichita to confirm what they thought. She arrived in a navy suit and sneakers, hair pulled back in a pencil. In the back of Good Circle, with the safe still humming, she unscrewed the case back with a tool I had a smaller version of in my tote. "Luminous star," she murmured, breath held like it might blow dust from the decades. "Fishtail regulator. Lockridge and Hale, Cal Zero, the ghost. We have one set of drawings. We've never seen one move. And look." She held the loop, and I leaned. "Your father's engraving. Scratch marks like a man who did a lot of work with steel and didn't mind if his signature looked like a field under wind. I made him a sandwich in the kitchen with the watch on the counter when I was 10, I said. I wasn't allowed to touch it without a cloth because he liked the glass clean." She looked up at me with that face people have when they're in rooms with relics. Reverence, a little sadness for the maker, and joy for the keeper. "It's in excellent shape," she said. "Better than excellent. This lived on a wrist that moved and a shelf that didn't." We took photos. We took more photos. Dr. Park signed forms that made my head spin. Leon called 3 times to confirm. The museum board convened a special session and voted fast because donors with last names carved into walls had grandchildren who wore little plastic wings they'd gotten on flights. The fund banked $18 million before I put a pen on an agreement. Every time a lawyer slid a piece of paper across a table, I thought of my mother crossing her legs at the knee, the way polite women were taught not to, and tapping her foot to the beat of a radio. "Mr. Rivers," Myra said the day after the party, "we're charging you with conspiracy to commit theft by deception. You can fight it. People like you often do." Cal's lawyer made noises. Meredith made calls. Cora made tea at my kitchen table with her hands shaking so hard the dog stood stiff for a second and then leaned his head against her thigh. We sat in that kitchen where my father had once come home smelling like solvent, and I told her a story about my wedding day and the way her dad's hand trembled when he tried to put my ring on because his father was dead and mine stood beside him like a mountain. "We have the people we take into rooms like this," I said, "and the people we let stay outside. Sometimes we don't know who's who until the door closes." I wanted to believe, she said into her cup. I did. "Me too," I said. "Belief is lighter than suspicion." She laughed without humor. "He hates clutter." "People who hate clutter don't get to touch what you love without asking," I said, wiping the counter because my hands needed motion. "There's clean and there's control. They are not the same." The museum insisted on a ceremony. I said, "I'll go if I can wear jeans." They said I could wear overalls if I wanted. I wore my mother's dress again, and I pinned my hair with the tortoiseshell comb so my mother could sit in the room. The donors stood near the front like men waiting to be called for photographs, hands in pockets, eyes damp. Dr. Park told the story of Lockridge and Hale and how men and women in this city had built things that flew. She talked about prototypes being both promise and warning. "This watch kept time in a house that kept a family," she said. "Now it will keep time for children who visit, and for the memory of work that made flight possible." The check was heavy in my hand in a way that had nothing to do with paper. It had strings attached, and for once, I liked the strings. The sale contract included free admission to the museum for every public school student in Sedgwick County for a year. It included a clause requiring the museum to fund a program called Time and Flight, a workshop where kids could come in, sit at a bench, and take apart a cheap clock with a tiny screwdriver and then put it back together. "We don't want to build watchmakers," I told the board. "We want to build attention. A lot of life is just learning how to look." I paid off my mortgage, replaced my roof, and got my teeth fixed because I'd put that off for a crown for 2 years. I set up the Foster Time and Flight Scholarship with a local community college. 2 full rides every year for girls who want to work with their hands in fields where men still hand them the wrong-sized gloves. I set up a fund for Good Circle to expand their safe storage and hire a second appraiser because Paula had cried when I told her she'd never have to tell someone we lost it again. I bought Trevor a laptop and a course at the junior college because he'd said he wanted to do more than load highlight reels for white tablecloth people. I tithed to my church because I am my mother's daughter. I gave the rest a job in the bank that let me sleep without worrying whether my cards would decline in a grocery line with people behind me. Cora moved back into my house for a while. She went back to Kansas City eventually, because that's what kids do who need to be where the noise is. But she came home for Sunday dinner, and sometimes for Tuesday breakfast, which is the meal I actually like best, because eggs cooperate more than people. She apologized, proper and plain. "I chose easy love," she said at my kitchen table a crayon doodle stuck to the wood because a kid once pressed too hard. I called you jealous. I took his side because it was convenient. That was wrong. I raised you to be wrong and then right, I said. That's how you learn. Don't make a habit of apologizing without changing, though. I don't want you to practice saying sorry like it's a party trick. She laughed. I broke the engagement, she said. He called 3 times to say we could fix it. He said I was choosing money over love. I told him I was choosing love that wouldn't throw my mother's life in a bag. What did he say? I asked. He told me I'd regret it, she said. He said he hoped the watch kept me warm at night. I told him that women have been warming themselves with less for centuries and doing just fine. That's my girl, I said. News of the ring made papers. Turns out Ballcap had more hats. There were 5 men and a woman in the circle, all with slightly clean records and perfectly clean shirts. They moved through retirement communities and church rummage sales like sharks near docks. They did that thing where they stand in living rooms and convince old women that their treasures are junk. Then they sold those women's lives online for pennies turned into dollars by the fact that they'd decided a story had no value without a buyer. They didn't get rich. Thieves rarely do. They got mean, because that's what happens to people who decide meaning is only numbers. Myra rolled up the ring and planted it. Leon did a segment on the show, our show now, because I feel like I was married to it, and he did it with respect. He never said our city wrong. He never said my father's name like a trivia answer. Months later, I went to the museum on a Saturday and stood behind a group of kids visiting from a school that had enough kids on free lunch to know how to behave in line. Their teacher told them to find something that made a sound and write the sound down. They stood in front of the watch and listened. I have listened to a watch tick my whole life. That day, it sounded like a choir of ants. One little boy pressed his ear to the glass, and the guard cleared his throat, and the boy stepped back, eyes big. "It's tiny thunder," he said. "It's time," I said. "Ladies and gentlemen," the docent said. This piece was owned by a machinist's daughter. The inscription inside reads, "To E. Foster." A little girl read, sounding out, "Keep time." Her fingernails were painted blue, chipped. She grinned at me without knowing who I was. When we left, Cora put her arm through mine. We walked to the parking lot under a sky scraped clean by wind. "Mum," she said, "if you ever want to sell your house and move to a condo, I will help you declutter." I laughed so loud, people turned. "You know," I said, "I'm actually fine where I am, but you can help me clean the garage." We did. I kept my father's toolbox, my mother's mixing bowl, and a box of letters my husband wrote me when we were too young to know sentences could break. Everything else? We looked at, thanked, and let go. We set aside anything that might be valuable and took it to Good Circle ourselves, press of palm to receipt. We met Paula's new appraiser. She was 19, she had a loop on a string around her neck, and she looked at a set of salt shakers like they might tell her a secret. We left, light. Sometimes I take calls now from people who heard our story. They send photos of watches and rings and quilts and ask if they're junk. I tell them what Leon told me in different words. Value is market, I say. Meaning is you. Don't let anyone collapse the second into the first without your consent. If you're listening because you lost something, I want you to hear this. Your worth is not on a hook in your kitchen. It's not in your daughter's decisions. It's not in a man who decides a room is cleaner if you leave. It's in your hands, the way you say your name, the calluses you built doing what your people needed you to do. Keep time. Keep dignity. Keep company with those who keep you. Lose everything else before you lose that. If this story made you sit up a little straighter, don't be a stranger. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've got your own version, your old, worthless something that turned out to be a ticket out of someone's idea of your life, tell me in the comments. I read them with my coffee when the house is quiet and the dog is snoring, and sometimes the ticking of a clock is the only thing between you and silence that burns. End.